it's easy to get confused about the investor's version of the problem and the customer's version of the problem. Very important to stay focused on the customer.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our founder's journey. This is part two of a two-part interview with Kashyap. The first part, definitely go and listen to that to understand their product HyperTrack, which is a logistics automation API. And it's fascinating, this whole movement of the API movement and a kind of layer of using apps where you don't have to design everything from beginning to end when you're building new software or need something within your application. I'm excited to hear, though, more of your journey, your story. Tell me, Kashyap, how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. Wow. That's, I'm old. So it would take a while, but let me try and recap that. I started my first company in the thick of the dot-com bubble while I was still a college student. So I was one of those fools in college who thought, any college, I can do this. And I think from the first company, I learned how hard it is to build startups and how much more there was to learn for me. And it also gave me sort of access to Silicon Valley. I'd started my company in Bombay in India. That's where I grew up and went to college, and sold my company to a Silicon Valley private company. But it gave me access to the Valley, and it just opened my eyes to how much more there is to build a startup. And then with my second and third startups, the second one, I built it in India and I sold it to a physical retailer, one of the largest in India at the time. And my third startup was a mobile payments app, which I sold to OpenTable in the US, which then got acquired by the Booking.com group as well. So I think with that, I spent, more than a decade in retail and e-commerce, and especially at the convergence of digital and physical. And I think that's the fascinating theme that stuck on with me. And that also gave birth to HyperTrack, my fourth company, where I saw that, the two trends of the API economy and, the sort of rise of the API and the physical digital convergence in commerce, and sort of matched them together and said, this is what the world needs.
You're no stranger to the fundraising journey then. What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes someone can make when seeking funding?
I would say, focus on the user and the customer at all times. And one of the biggest mistakes during funding is get too focused on the investors and start believing your own press, or start believing the investor's version of how this business pans out. Because most often what happens is, investors are really good at pattern matching at the macro and sort of going top down. And the entrepreneur's journey really begins with, oh, I think that person can do this thing better if I solve the problem this way, right? And I think there are enough of them out there that this can be a large business, right? So it's sort of very bottom up and solving a specific problem. So it's easy to get confused about the investor's version of the problem and the customer's version of the problem. Very important to stay focused on the customer.
When the concept of getting the funding and you have that and you're getting started, team is kind of the next big question. Building the right team, a good team, allowing you to grow. What have you seen are common mistakes one can make in hiring and building a team?
A great question. Team is the company. In fact, a team is the product. When you're building something from scratch, it's the team's imagination of the user's problem and how we should solve it that really matters, right? You cannot really go spec and roadmap and translate it to a list of tasks and get it done. It's a very iterative process, because you're trying to guess what the user wants, but in many cases the user doesn't know that they want it, right? So you're inventing something which you think meets the market where they are. So in that process, I think finding team members who are passionate about the user or their problem, and are first principles problem solvers who bring in experience but know that they need to unlearn that. And no startup has, you can't sort of repeat what you've learned in the past. Um, in 9 out of 10 startups, it just doesn't work that way. You're building something new, and when you're building something new, you have to be more open to solving it in a different way and knowing when to apply your experience and when not, right? So I think team members who have that, let's understand the user, work backward from there, those are very valuable.
Because I imagine come into play where somebody thinks they know the solution because they just have this previous experience. But if you're not really paying attention to what the customer needs and where this product you're trying to build is going, you could be applying the wrong solution to the problem.
Exactly. You got that.
I imagine as the team grows, then managing the team themselves has its challenges in keeping the culture flowing and moving in the right direction. How big is the team today for you guys?
It's about 15 people between US and Ukraine.
Gotcha. Any lessons learned from your previous ventures and to this one of as the team grows, especially if they're international, what are insights can you share for others?
Sure. We had a combination of co-located and remote. So our remote team was truly remote in the sense that they each worked from home, and in different parts of East Europe and India. And our co-located team in San Francisco, we would all show up at one office and work. And what we learned from that is, that hybrid thing doesn't quite work. You're either all co-located or you're all remote, right? Or you could have multiple co-located offices with a few team members representing and then interactions happening. Thanks to, it's obviously a terrible virus that's taken the world by storm, but thanks to that, we all went remote just overnight, right? And we actually saw that after the sort of first couple of weeks, 1 month of adjustment, I was one of the people who thought a startup at this size, fully remote, everybody working from home does not work. But I can tell you, I've transformed in that belief. It works like a charm. And everyone remote, you end up setting a good process where it works for everybody and you can actually get work done and actually be creative and build stuff.
You're a believer now.
I'm a believer now. And, I used to say, where's the whiteboard? How, if you can't stand up and draw on the whiteboard, how can you build anything, right? Mm-hmm. A rocket ship starts on the whiteboard. But I think there are enough tools out there which help you whiteboard talking this way.
Any just on that note of any apps or tools that over the last 8 months, 9 months this has been that you found have really worked for your team?
That's a good question. And these days there's so many tools available for so many things that it just becomes a hot topic. And I think my biggest learning is for everyone to understand that the best tool is the one you use. And whenever the discussion goes deeper into tools and comparisons, it's a signal for me that something's wrong, right? We're focusing on the wrong problem. And what I find is for anything you want to do, if you pick the sort of, one of the top 5 most popular, whichever one you pick gets the job done. So it's really which one does the team really use and engage in, just hunker down on that and start using it.
I love that perspective. Don't get caught up with all of these features, but what does the team actually use and adopt readily and go with that one?
Yeah, and oftentimes you'll find that, people use tools even without knowing that they've made a choice to use that tool for that purpose. Because when you start looking at, what should I use for project management? Then you sort of look at a category of tools, but then you realize that the stuff that you're using right now, which you're not even classifying as project management, is actually your project management tool. and there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe you need something that embraces and extends that rather than does a tectonic shift of how we operate.
Obviously, having the right team, the right working environment allows for growth. But when it comes to marketing and acquiring clients and customers and being able to use your platform, are there any common mistakes you see people have made or are making when it comes to marketing in today's environment?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think especially early on in startups, the more you focus on what the user wants, which ends up becoming a very iterative product function. You're putting something out there, they're using it, you're watching them use it, and then building it better. And at some point, the insight presents itself of what is your best marketing tool? How are these people finding you? What's sticking with them? What is solving their business problem enough that they're willing to pay you money for it? And those nuggets are the ones that you need to amplify in marketing. So I think the process of discovering that gold and giving the users that megaphone or amplifying the part that's working is sort of true marketing that works at this earliest stage in startups. Often the mistake then is if your marketing starts with, okay, this is what I want to achieve, these are the metrics I want to achieve, this is what I wish would happen, and starts spending money on that or starts spending cycles on that, and then tries to see where it overlaps with the product. And the product keeps on moving dynamically, the marketing keeps on moving dynamically, the overlaps keep changing, it gets very, very confusing. So sort of using marketing as a way to amplify what's working with the users is the right way, I think.
Any suggestions or tactics that you found have worked well when it comes to either isolating and finding said things that your customers are enjoying or working well and amplifying that? Any tactics that you found have worked?
Sure. So, one great way to do that is force yourself to not spend money on marketing in the early days, right? Even if you have the money in the bank, don't spend money because it contaminates the signal. It makes your understanding of what the user wants and what the market wants a bit noisy. So use money to accelerate what's working, right? If a certain kind of content is working or a certain kind of user is finding that content useful or finding your product useful, then double down on that with money, right? So put that fuel in when you know that it's going in the right direction. So keep the discovery part in, very close to heart. Just watch users use your product, see what's working for them, and put money in when you've understood that insight, and now you're doubling down on that. I don't know if that was too fuzzy, but
it's being cautious of not just wasting marketing just at everything. It's using, I guess, existing insights and doubling out. But you have to still do something to see what's working, and then to be able to double down more on it. So that's why I guess the biggest thing I'm trying to understand is, like, how do you decide what do you start on? Because do people initially find out about it? Are you doing content marketing? Is it just reaching out to people?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So listening to users, and you can only listen to users if you have something to say, because otherwise the users won't talk. So let me give you an example. So let's say we think that developers who want to use the API are going to come from these 4 different channels, right? I can author open source repositories on GitHub. I can write technical blog posts. I can participate in some developer platforms and publish something, right? And then you start seeing, okay, this thing is working better than the other. And in this thing, in this channel that I opened up, what the developer actually wants is this. These kind of repositories are doing well, those are not doing well. Or they're coming for the repositories, but this is what they want from it. This is what they want more from it. So then the spending could be, okay, let me invest in more developers who can build these open source repositories, which give you examples of how to use your product. Or let me invest in more of our engineers writing blog posts of the kind which appeals to these developers. Right? So now, if I were to just throw a budget at Google and say, give me developers who want logistics automation, and if I keep increasing the budget, I will keep getting more volume. Some of that will stick, but it becomes a very noisy signal of what really worked there. And in that, you miss out on the golden nugget of what was the more effective way to get the same number of users with same or higher intent.
It's an interesting perspective and approach to be able to not waste money, but be able to get effective feedback on what is both working, what are people interested, so you can double down. I feel like today's environment, though, is very noisy because everyone's going digital with their content. There's no trade shows, there's no conferences, no place to go during an era of COVID. How do you stand out and make and get that initial audience set in these different verticals, different channels? Any thoughts or recommendations?
Yeah, I would say a lot can happen with content, whether you're targeting a self-serve product or enterprise software product that requires a full-blown sales cycle. I'm just fascinated by how much can be achieved with just great content, which jives with what the user is thinking. You have a CIO or a CTO who is dealing with, hey, 80% of my business was in store and 20% was door, and now things have flipped. What does this mean to me? What should I be doing? I was giving business to those app companies and on-demand logistics guys to take care of my 20%, but should I be giving them business for this 80%? Should I be buying software, or should I be building a core capability in-house to address some of these things, right? Is technology that core to me? How much should I invest in technology? How much should I do inside of my organization, and how much should I buy, right? Where do I draw the line? Now, these are some of the themes that all of these people are thinking. And if you meet them where they are with something compelling in the medium that they want to consume, you'll be surprised how many of them will discover you and sign up and, get on the call with you to sort of understand and talk about that problem. And, right off the bat, they're there to understand your solution, understand how you've done with other companies, rather than the classic wine and dine and schmooze.
I think that's a fascinating angle of really just looking at what questions they're asking, creating content around it. You are coming from a product-led, I guess, marketing mindset of just people to try it and get into it, not a direct sales, like let's call all these companies. Is that correct? You're
correct. I have, in my younger days, I've done cold calling off a list. I've been a bag carrying sales guy, visiting customers. I've got lots of rejections, right? And if I look back at that, I think what eventually worked in all of these situations is, of course, they have to like you before they buy from you, the old adage, but they spend more time with you if they believe that you can solve their problem. And even in that sort of approach of calling leads and figuring it out, your best customers are the ones who have a pain. You understood that pain, you connected the dots and said, okay, this is how I'm going to solve it. And then you actually solved it, right? And then you have your big contract somewhere along the line, right? So in a way, if marketing is a way to acquire many customers at a time, then if you can get a pulse of what that pain is that represents a large number of customers, and what that solution is that helps them address that pain, which they might not have thought of, or they're thinking about it but don't know how to get, then that's a way to get many customers at once.
Looking forward here and going into next year, what challenges do you see you're going to need to overcome in order to keep growing and to keep scaling, both in the environment that we're in, which probably doesn't affect too much you guys, but just the set of scale that you're at right now? What challenges do you see you're going to need to overcome?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think our business has turned upside down in many ways because of the events of 2020. We used to look at our business as deliveries, visits, and rides, right? Deliveries have gone up drastically. Visits had a dip, and every time there's sort of a lockdown that happens, there's a dip, but then it recovers to roughly the same level. But rides are completely off, right? Transportation, whether it's public transportation or ride sharing or employee transportation, nobody's going anywhere unless it's essential service, which is essentially deliveries or visits. So I would say, to answer your question, where the world is going, I might not necessarily like that, but where the world is going is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The bigger companies are getting bigger, while the smaller companies or smaller businesses are dying. So as much as an API economy company or a self-serve SaaS company counts on a vibrant horizontal market where a lot of small people use the product and some of them become large, I think what we're learning the hard way, and I've talked to other entrepreneurs in similar spaces as well, is more of your revenue, more of your business, more of your capital will come from higher concentration of capital or higher concentration of business. So how do you then transform your business to focus on the larger companies and get in, get in through the door there? The good news is that even with larger companies, the top-down sales doesn't quite work like it used to. It is still very sort of, there is a role of content and APIs and companies building themselves within multiple small teams and so on, more demos, more sort of touch and feel and quick onboarding. So a lot of those rules apply, but obviously it's a very different go-to-market and set of customers.
For you on the insight over the years, where have you turned to get good learnings, leadership learnings, or business development when it comes to books, audiobooks, podcasts? Any that you can recommend or that you're reading right now?
Sure. What was that? There are three ways to learn. One is by reading. The other is visual. The third is kinesthetic. Learning by doing, I guess. I think I'm the learning by doing category, and it's if I can generalize this to entrepreneurs, we have really thick brains in that it's really hard to listen to people and we feel like we know everything, right? And we want to figure it out on our own. So I think the experiential learning or learning by doing is sort of the best way that I learn. But yes, I do, read, nonfiction primarily. Well, I'm currently reading The Climate Crisis and the Green New Deal by Noam Chomsky. And I'm also reading The Billionaire Raj by James Crabtree, who's a journalist, who I happen to know and I've worked with in the past. But I mean, these topics are unrelated really to the business. I have found actually that to be quite eye-opening in, if you sort of listen to a very different topic than what you're on, there are patterns that actually connect between the two. So even reading about climate change or reading about, the the Indian system of large companies or billionaires actually helps in a weird sort of way in logistics automation API.
It can give you just a different perspective, a different way to look at things.
Yeah, it helps you snap out of it. And I think as CEOs, as entrepreneurs, a big part of our job is to zoom out and look at it outside in, and lateral reading tends to help me.
Last question for you. What kind of tech innovations do you predict we will see in the near term, the next year or so, and long term, 5-10 years from now?
Sure. So, my view right now is very myopic on my space, which is physical retailers are transforming their business to look at home delivery. And, that part is just fascinating, where your online orders represented a small number of your orders, you would allocate it to stores, and the stores would have their own P&L, and it was all very store centric. And now it's all sort of decoupled, and now it's most of your orders are coming in online. How do you allocate it to a larger logistics team, which could pick up from any store or warehouse and deliver to any door? So I think a lot of technologies around automating and making this new world more efficient is what I'm bullish on, right? Some of the boring stuff, it's not quite rockets and AI and robots, but I live in a world where I'm seeing patterns of how the world is changing, and how can you be prepared to solve the hardest real world problems, right?
It's the real world problems that technology is perfect for helping to solve. It's just if you can see the patterns to apply it, that can make a great business and provide a great solution.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kashyap, for sharing your story, your insight, and all the many lessons learned. I'm sure there's even more that we could cover right now. Again, I'd recommend anyone wants to check out HyperTrack.com to see more about their platform and their API. Give it a test drive to see for location, no pun intended, location-driven content. This is our Founders Journey series. Again, it is sponsored for today's episode is TerraLeap. So if your company wants to find out how to better leverage the power of video to increase sales and marketing results, head over to TerraLeap.io and learn about the new product Customer Stories. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.